Hey Greg, let's talk bourbon. In particular, let's talk about Frey Ranch Farm Strength Uncut. Now, I know, a lot of YouTubers have already reviewed this bottle in the last, year or two, right? This bottle's been around for a while. But I live in Wisconsin. And in Wisconsin, Frey Ranch, we don't have it on the shelves. They don't distribute here. And in fact, I've never seen this bottle or anything from Frey Ranch on the shelves in Illinois. I didn't find this bottle until I got down to Georgia, where I was deer hunting and bourbon hunting down there back in late October. So that's when I finally found this bottle, picked it up, brought it home, and it's been sitting in my basement since. Just the last week, I decided, you know what, I'm going to pull it out of the basement, open it up, give it a try. And you know what, I think it's fantastic. And I thought I would share my thoughts about it to you. So, yes, I know people have already reviewed this, but my thoughts are I think you'll find some original thoughts here, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, just to read a couple of little things off the bottle because it's actually interesting. Most bottles are not all that interesting. This one's actually quite interesting. First off, it's non-chill filtered. It's cask strength, or they call it farm strength. It's uncut. What's also interesting, it's grown, distilled, matured, and bottled by Frey Ranch in Fallon, Nevada, and it's 120 proof. But what's also really interesting, though, is that their barley, they actually malt the barley themselves on site, which I think is just above and beyond the call of duty, right? Who does that, right? Nobody does that. I'm sure most distilleries are buying their malted barley for, and they're not producing that themselves. So, anyways, just the whole mash bill is kind of interesting. So it is 66% dent corn. Now, dent corn. Most people probably don't know what dent corn is. Here in Wisconsin, we grow a lot of corn. I don't think any of the farmers grow dent corn. So dent corn, as far as I know, the main use, maybe the only use for dent corn generally is it's used for grits. That's the corn that they use to chop up and make grits out of. But like I said, that's a southern thing. Up here in Wisconsin, I don't think any of the farmers grow dent corn. So it's also 10% winter wheat. Never heard anybody refer to their wheat as being winter wheat. 11.4% winter rye. Again, never heard anybody refer to their rye as being a winter rye. And 12% two-row barley, malted on site. Like I said, I've never heard anybody malting their own barley, at least not a little guy like this. So I think that's pretty interesting. So let's get into the tasting notes, because I got to tell you, now I know it's 120 proof, so you would think that it's going to be a little stronger, and it should be, right? And it is. Let me tell you, the nose on this is absolutely wonderful, and it's very strong. You can't miss it. And I mean, it's honey, it's vanilla. There's some breadiness to it. There's also a little bit of a maltiness to it. Nutmeg. And maybe a little fruit. And on the palate, there's a good strong palate. On the palate, it's very fruit forward. That fruit it's more of like a pear or a peach. Nutmeg is still there. The sweetness is still there. I keep going back and forth as to whether or not it's vanilla or whether it's honey. And then the finish is a baking spice finish. It's not overpowering, but I gotta tell you, it's also very peppery. So I always kind of like those finishes that are a little on the peppery side. Real tasty. Strong on the nose, strong on the palate. I mean, you would hope so for 120 proof, but not all of them deliver, right? So this is very tasty. But like I said, this is a 4 grain. So it's got corn, wheat, rye, and barley. And so I thought I would compare it against a couple of other 4 grains that I own. And just for comparison, this is not a limited edition. This is not a single barrel. This is just a core release that is, a small batch. And so here I'm going to compare it against, this is a bit of a limited release. And well, now this one here is just also a core release. So this one is the Old Elk 4 grain. And this one here is the Grizzly Beast from Redwood Empire. So to talk about the Redwood Empire here, they're 4 grain. In fact, it's actually not even a 4 grain. Believe it or not, this Grizzly Beast is actually a 5 grain. They actually have 2% triticale in it. Now, if you're wondering what the hell triticale is, I had to look it up myself. Triticale is an heirloom version of rye. So this one actually has kind of a similar mash bill in that it's 66% corn, 20% rye, 5% wheat, 5% barley, and 2% triticale. But it's only 100 proof as compared to the 120 proof, and it's very noticeable. Of course, one of the things I've noticed with this bottle is that this is totally crushable. It's really tasty, but it's soft, and it's really good by itself if you want to just sit and cuddle up, in front of a TV with this bottle. But when you compare this bottle to others, the nose just disappears. The palate's pretty good in terms of strength. It's a fairly medium strength of a palate, and that's very tasty. Caramel, confectionery sugar, cinnamon, and some baking spices. It is very tasty, but it pales in comparison to the Frey Ranch. They also have another 4 grain here, which is, of course, the Old Elk 4 grain. Now, Old Elk does a lot of blending, so this is actually a blended bourbon. It's their high malt bourbon with their wheated bourbon, all 6 to 7 years old. And it's kind of interesting in that it's 22% wheat, 19% barley, 7.5% rye, and 51% corn. So high wheat and high barley content in this Old Elk 4 grain. Interesting thing about this Old Elk 4 grain is I picked this bottle up because TJ, Bruzel, I saw several of his videos where every time he passed this bottle on the shelf, he would stop and point it out and say, Old Elk 4 grain, that's really good. And so since he kept saying it, I had to run out and buy a bottle of it. Besides, I like Old Elk. I've got several of the Old Elk bottles around here. Really good. I love their single barrels. Their cigar cut is to die for. It's amazing. So the 4 grain is also pretty good, but it's not as good as the ones I just mentioned. And the reason I would say that is that what comes really forward in this Old Elk is the maltiness and the graininess. It's actually kind of grainy. And then on top of that, it's also got a real citrusiness to it. Behind that, maybe a little bit of breadiness, a little bit of baking spices. It's good. It will, if you sit and sip this for a while, it will show you some complexity, which probably comes from the fact that it's blended. But I got to tell you, again, this is 106 proof, and it's not nearly as strong as the Frey Ranch. It's not as strong on the palate. It's not as strong on the nose, and I mean not nearly as much. Right? This is really, really strong on the nose, really strong on the palate. And to be honest with you, the Frey Ranch has the better nose of all of these, and I think the better palate as well. So I don't have a very big selection of 4 grains here on my shelves. I think this is it. But I think I have a 4 grain rye. But I didn't bother to bring that out because these are all bourbons. But I got to tell you, this is easily the best 4 grain I own. This Frey Ranch is really, really good and beats these easily. This Frey Ranch, think I bought this for $70-$80, somewhere in that range. The Redwood Empire Grizzly Beast was $80, and I think the Old Elk 4-grain was also in that $70 to $80 range. So these are all pretty comparable price wise. Boy, it's just lovely. It really is. Now, do I think that the Frey Ranch is like amongst the best bottles that I own? Well, probably not. I've got a lot of limited edition and single barrels and stuff like that around here on these shelves. And this probably can't hold up to those. But if I were to take, a core release bottle that's cask strength, and I were to take my various core release cask strength bottles that I've got around and compare this to them, I bet this would do really, really well. I think this could well be one of the best core release, small batch, cask strength bottles I've got. I think I just gave myself an idea for a blind. I think look for that here in the next, week or so. I think I'm going to put out a blind where I blind this against other core release, small batch, cask strength bottles. I think that's going to be fantastic. I bet this is going to do really well. So anyway, if you liked what I had to say, please like and subscribe, and peace out.